painting to photography, from beadwork to woodworking. KQAL FM on the campus of Winona State University presents Art Beat. Art Beat highlights the work and accomplishments of local artists from in and around Winona. Support for Art Beat is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.
Today on Art Beat, we talked to artist Dan Eastman about his exhibit Dreamtime that was at the Winona Arts Center. Dreamtime is a collection of paintings exploring dreams and the mysteries surrounding them. Dan Eastman is not only a visual artist, but he was also a professor in the Mass Communications Department at Winona State University. KQAL's Jiovani Bermudez sat down with Dan Eastman at the opening of his exhibit titled Dreamtime at the Winona Arts Center. Here's KQAL's Jiovani Bermudez with Dan Eastman today on Art Beat.
We often think of dreams, and we have vivid dreams. Vivid dreams exist. But at the same time, most of the memory, not only our cogent memory, but our dream memory is fragmented and overlaid. And different people and different cultures dream in different ways. Not only because of their culture, and not only because of their experience, but because the permanent instability of sequence creates a different construct. And we then agree on some of those constructs. If we speak English, we agree with the noun. Oh, that looks like a fern. That looks like a dog. Oh, look at the white wall. He's holding up his hand, etc. Other languages can privilege other things, like the verb, or the action, or the relationship. And even to the point of where it's put in the sentence in writing, etc. We also spend most of our time dismissing things as opposed to engaging them, because it would be overwhelming. There are thousands of things in this room that we're not paying attention to. Now, if we point to paying attention to it, then we switch. But that switch becomes an overlay of what we were just doing. And then we try and see if we can connect it. And that's often what we call understanding, which is different than knowledge. It's something we already know and have engaged and can engage separate. And dreams are not necessarily about knowledge, but they're certainly engaged with a form of understanding, meaning to us. Also, as a species, part of our way to adapt to the world is to forget. Because if we didn't, there'd be too much at us at once. So you've all had dreams, so remember a dream that you had in the past. And as you remember that now, that's a different overlay than when you remembered it the last time. It's generally the same, but creates a dynamic. One of the interesting things about hanging this show was we noticed that opening up the stained glass helped. Because it draws the overlay. And to a certain extent, stained glass is constructed as a form of collage, which all of this work is a form of collage as well. So people who pay attention to their dreams a lot actually wonder a lot when they're awake. It helps encourage the idea of wandering and wondering. Curiosity is what most of us really want when we get bored. Oh, I'm bored. Well, open your eyes, touch something. See if you can name 5 smells. Feel the inside of your pants on your ankles. In other words, be sensitive. We're all synesthetic. We have lots of smell, taste, touch, etc. But it's all overlaid. It's all simultaneous. It all informs each other. But we have a tendency to only to pay attention to certain parts of it. As a European culture, we privilege vision. Many other cultures would privilege touch. Other cultures privilege edges, the edge of things. So when I look at this gentleman, typically we look at his sweater and him and his eyes, and they would privilege the edge of here into the space. The space would be more important than the body because the space made the edge. These sorts of things can show up in artwork. Now, whether or not you're going to pay attention to them becomes another form of overlay of your experience and what you learn. So I could say something you might not have thought of before today, and you'll go do that once or twice. If it becomes interesting to you, it'll turn into an habituation. If it's not, you'll wait till the next curiosity comes from somewhere else. There's no need for it to be official or agreed upon for it to be a part of your experience. So when you talk about Dreamtime, there's a second part of that is time. We think of time as sequential, past, present, future. Dreamtime is actually a word from Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime and song lines, which means there is no sequence to time. Their ancestors are there in the land, and their future generations are there in the land with them. And the land is only thought of as a song. It's experienced as a physicality, but it's thought of as a song. And when you learn the song that the land teaches you, you can speak to the land. So these different kinds of constructs actually show up in our dreams. You don't have to invent them. They're endemic to the wandering of the species. You wander in the world, and you wander in your interior. You wander exterior, interior. And they're overlaid. And the more you wander, the more you wonder. And the more you wonder, the more you wander. So, and wandering creates a world where it's not either this or that. Either this is the chair, or it's not a chair. Well, there's also several other things that it is constructed of. It's got wood, it's got metal, etc. So it becomes both and more. And mostly what we engage with is both and more. But we isolate it so we can pay attention to that part. But then how is it interrelated? There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence. This is a longer discussion in different ways, but the one thing that artificial intelligence can't do, and probably won't ever be able to do, is interrelate with the overlay by wondering. Because it needs input that has to respond to by a program. And they can do that at picoseconds, 1 quadrillionth of a second. It can store more memory than all of the brains on the planet in I think it was 17 seconds, et cetera, et cetera. But what do you need to exist? Food, health. Well, what does AI need to exist? Power. We say, oh, we'll have an AI the size of so-and-so. Actually, we could have an AI the size of so-and-so, but we don't have enough power on the planet to do it. In fact, it's already worrisome in some nations that AI is starting to take up more power than the grid. Now, this isn't about AI other than, but I'm wondering about that. These are the kinds of things that when you wander and wonder, you will dream of, and it will extrapolate beyond your sense of what you already know. In other words, dreaming is also a way to explore. When we do that when we're awake, we call it daydreaming. So they're not paying attention, they're daydreaming. Well, perhaps in that context it's appropriate or not, but they're also not just inert. They're engaged. In fact, daydreaming is a pretty good form of focus. So I could take comments and/or questions for 5-6 minutes, and then we could wander around, and you put a star on the wall if you want a piece, and take one home.
I'm joined here by Professor Dan Eastman. How are you doing today?
Today is a good day, thank you.
So why don't you tell our audience what you're presenting here at the Art Center?
Okay, this is a set of work over the last roughly 3 years called Dreamtime. And Dreamtime is a form of abstraction. Many of us dream vividly and as if it were real life. But at the same time, mostly what we dream is erratic, non-sequential, and even abstract. So, and these works are more along the latter than the former.
And what inspired you to really focus on the aspect of dreams as something erratic and without?
Well, if you really look around, we live in a 90-degree culture, and we try and control everything. We meaning, the Western culture. But nature is both erratic and controlled. From its point of view, it's controlled. From our point of view, it's erratic, because it doesn't fit our criteria for numerical measurement. But it exists in a form of overlay and collage and interpenetration that's, no pun intended, natural.
And what do you think made humans fall away from the idea of seeing nature as controlled? Why did we distance ourselves from it?
Well, that's a fairly large question. Depending on the point of view you take, it could be biological, a Darwinian, it could be social construct, etc. So as you look at those, one of the answers is we have a tendency to want to control by complexity and to recognize patterns and use those patterns for a kind of continuity. But in reality, even a scheduled culture spends about more time rescheduling than scheduling. In other words, the whole idea of the instability of sequence, you can still go in the same direction, but not always the same path.
You know, when I'm looking at your work, I know that it's meant to take the erratic sense of dreams or the non-structured way, but I was talking with some people around here, and there are people who started seeing pictures in them or seeing structures or seeing stories even. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are what I just said. We seek pattern, even when it's not there. We'll even conjure a pattern that's not there. We don't seem to want to engage the random. There's nothing particularly wrong with the random, but we simply want it to be either this or that. When most things are both and more.
I want to elaborate on the concept of both and more.
Okay. Both and more, again, we have a tendency to say, this is this and it's only this. But only under certain contexts and conditions is that true. And those contexts and conditions usually don't last long. Things interpenetrate, they overlay, they merge, etc. And that's the world we actually live in. For instance, remember a dream you had a year ago.
All right, you caught me. I wouldn't be able to do that. I have it written down somewhere, but not in my memory.
And even if you have it written down somewhere, when you conjure it, it won't be the same. It'll be fragmented, it'll be out of sequence, but it will have a general impact. And that general impact is what we call perception.
So let's dive a little more into how these artworks came to be. So when we're looking at them, they're constructed of a bunch of different mediums. So you have some that are old photography you had, some are paintings you've done.
So the material is different, but the collage technique is the same.
And how did you go about physically making it? Can you tell us a bit about your process?
Well, first of all, I retired, I think it was 3 years ago next week. And I had 3 studios. I live in a fairly large place and blah, blah, blah. So I was collapsing them into one. And therefore handling, stacks of things I hadn't looked at in some instances decades ago. So I started to think about, this whole room is a collage. It just hasn't been assembled yet. And I also at the same time wanted to make things smaller. I was painting fairly large, at least 4 by 4 feet, if not 5 or 6 feet. So these are like 11.5 by 5.5, 15.5 by 7, and 7 by 36. That's fairly small. And how do you then use those techniques, placement, proximity, proportion, color, movement, and something smaller to get the same kind of impact for people's perception?
Now, when coming here, you're giving a lot, if not all, these artworks away. What?
All
right. What drove you to do that? I mean, I noticed you say you looked at it and you said it's an unfinished collage, but what's pushing you to just give all this work away?
Well, it's not just that it's being given away. It's that the art world has turned into a commercial commodity world. In fact, there are more people in the art world who are managing artists than there are artists. I think that's a bit of a travesty. Meaning, art is meant to be not just shared, but to be a part of the community and be a gift culture as opposed to a take culture. And I'm perfectly willing to do that. This is the second show I've done that with. The other show was at the Art Institute over by Lourdes, where I gave away pieces to children and that were going to the art school. And they could choose it, and then they would come and see me, and I would, they would name it. I'd write the name on the back and then talk to them about how they liked the title, and then it was their work. People should have significant works of art. I'm not trying to brag about these are good or bad, but this is not off-the-shelf art, so to speak. It's not been thought of as a commodity by an agent who's going to a gallery who has a Rolodex to make money.
So in a way, all this artwork is the sharing of an experience. And
even when all artwork is a sharing of an experience, even when it's a commodity, it's just not thought of that way. Most art collectors look at it as if it were an investment. Andy Warhol famously said, "Why not just put $200,000 in $1,000 bills on the wall? You're just showing how much money you've got."
So, what's the future now that is...
My future?
Yeah.
Let me see. I'm now in the last quarter of my life, so every day is my future.
I mean, like, this exhibit's about the dreams and ideas of that.
So what will I do in my artwork? I'm working with some of the artists I've worked with before overseas. People I know that I worked with in Chengdu in China, in Port of Spain, in Trinidad, and in Bridgetown in Barbados. And we're looking at trying to do a few things together. We've before done works that we've actually worked on and sent back and forth. I've had many of them in my studio, and I've been in their studios for days and months at a time. So I think we'd like to put together a kind of consortium of some kind. That's vague because it's not fleshed out yet.
All right. Well, we have a bunch of artists listening to this, right? Some of whom we have a bunch of artists listening to this, and some of whom have come and seen your work. It's the commodity culture thing really jumps out at me, and there are a bunch of people who study art, who love art, but also want to use it as a way to kind of support themselves and live their life, right? What would you say to that?
I would say to that, here's my hat. Here's some wild rice. I'll pour the wild rice in the hat and sell it for $600,000. Is that art?
I know people who would say yes, and I know people who would say no.
Well, what it is, it's marketing. I can market the goat on the bottom of my shoes. In fact, there are people who did market elephant.
Seriously?
Seriously.
So I guess the message is that...
And again, to quote Andy Warhol, art is anything you can get away with in the commercial world.
So what advice would you have for up-and-coming artists?
Wander, get lost. Once lost, twice found.
Can you elaborate on that?
Don't always do something you think you know what it's going to be. It's not a matter of knowing what it's going to be. It's a matter of discovering what it becomes.
All right, well, thank you for doing this interview with us. I appreciate the time.
Oh, good. Thank you. You bet.
Thanks again to Dan Eastman for joining us today on Art Beat. To learn more about Dan's work, go to daneastmanblog.wordpress.com. For more conversations on art, tune into Art Beat Tuesdays at 12:30 right here on 89.5 KQAL. For podcasts of Art Beat and other KQAL original programming, go to KQAL.org. I'm Bill Stoneberg, and we've just heard from KQAL's Jiovani Bermudez with Dan Eastman, today on Art Beat.
Art Beat is written and produced by KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University. Visit us on the web at KQAL.org.